Good evening, members. It's now 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Area Planning Subcommittee South meeting on the 3rd of August. First item on the agenda is to read the webcasting introduction. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or any other use by such third parties. If you are seated in the lower public seating area, it is likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the possibility that your image will become part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human and data protection rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should move to the upper public gallery. Thank you. Can I introduce the officers who are here this evening? We have James Rogers on development, online, Kumar Armiton, Andrew Marks, Vivian Messenger from Democratic Services to my left, Jackie Leither on the webcast, and Natalie's our webcaster on the far end. I will be a voting chairman this evening. Item 2 on the agenda, advice to public and speakers attending the Council Planning Subcommittees on pages 5 to 8. And then on to item 3, apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from Councillors Baldwin, Jogia, Smruti Patel, Heap and Mead.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to declare an interest in item 9, item 11 and item 14. Item 9, I am aware of the applicant. I do know him, but it's not a prejudicial interest. And on 11 and 14, I was responsible for calling those applications in.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, item 15, I know the owner, so non-pecuniary interest in our vote. Also, I think just a point of order, I know the names were taken off, the applicant's names, so it's quite hard to work out if you do have an interest in some items.
That is being addressed, yeah, thank you. Councillor Murray.
Yes, item 11, Chairman, it's non-prejudicial. It's been brought to my attention that a volunteer I know at the food bank's garden borders this property, but I consider it non-prejudicial.
Thank you. I also have a declaration of interest on item 9, 117 High Road, and should have had at the last meeting. I didn't realise until the site visit that I actually knew the candidate, the applicant candidate. He might get the job, yeah. It's the applicant, yeah, thank you. And declaration, Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, apologies for slight lateness. I've got the same declaration as you, that the applicant is known to me.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, members. Item 5, the minutes which have been sent through on 9 to 20. Any comments? Councillor Lyon.
Chairman, it may be worthwhile members of the Conservative group to declare an interest because the applicant for item 9 has stood in an election, so it may be worth noting that.
That was why I declared, exactly. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, the minutes, can we approve the minutes as drafted? Agreed, thank you. Moving on. Item 6, any other business?
Once again, Chairman, I draw attention to the state of the list issued of planning decisions this morning, which I found impossible to use. And I think you said, apropos something else, that this was being attended to.
This is the names of the applicants being listed.
Oh, sorry, no, this is the fact that you cannot easily, in the spreadsheet, find out what decision refers to what application and what application refers to what property. It's just that we are being presented with a spreadsheet rather than a report.
Okay, I would take that forward, thank you. Any other business?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 8, site visits. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to request a site visit to 42 Churchill in Loughton. And the reason being that whilst the plans are of a very good quality and easy to understand, I want to see basically the impact that the neighbours have drawn to our attention. So I'd like to have a site visit to 42 Churchill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patel, then Councillor Ryan.
Sorry, Chairman, there's just something under any other business. Sorry, I missed it. But perhaps if you finish this item, I can come back to it.
Okay, Councillor Ryan.
Just on the item, I mean, I don't want to disagree, but that is the person that's known to me. They've been waiting, I think, 3 months to come to this committee, so delaying it another month. I just want to be sure that we're going to go ahead with this.
Okay. We have a proposed, Councillor Pond.
Second, Chairman.
Okay. We have a proposal and a seconder for a site visit to 42 Church Hill. Do we go to a vote? We do. We go to a vote?
No, just if the committee agrees.
Does the committee agree that that's the way forward on this application? Unfortunately, that means it is deferred. I take your point, Councillor Owen, but it is deferred until a site visit, and then hopefully we'll be at the next meeting.
Chairman, may I request that the officers arrange access to the premises of the main objector, because, as Councillor Jennings says, it is a question of gauging the impact on the neighbours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, members. We now go on to the planning. Oh, sorry, just Councillor Patel, you have a...
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to
business.
come back.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify a point. I mean, obviously, at the last meeting, you know, one of the items that was discussed and then deferred back to this meeting, 91 Queen's Road. Can I just ask in future if councillors are aware of anything material to the consideration of an application? It's brought forward to officers' attention before the meeting, as was normal protocol. This isn't the first time. I know that there's one other application that I'm aware of where something arose in the middle of the meeting, which was material to the determination of that application. And it's useful so that we can officers are prepared and able to respond adequately.
Thank you. Councillor Pond, you wish to...
Just to take up that point, yes, I quite agree. It should have been brought up before. I only learnt the full impact of the proposal the day before, and I did try to speak to the chairman, but unfortunately didn't get in touch. We weren't able to get in touch. I think the chairman was elsewhere. So, yes, I quite agree with Councillor Patel. Where possible, it should be raised in advance.
Yeah, but there are moves to actually address this by getting the agenda out a week earlier than currently. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the proof's in the pudding as well. Tonight, we've had the resident come all the way here. That site visit could easily have been, that visit could easily have been avoided if they'd contacted the officers in ahead. You can see how frustrated that resident was. So I don't think that's fair. Thank you.
I totally agree, but it's democracy in action. Can we move on to the planning applications, members? The first item 9 is 117 High Road, EPF 294819.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The first item number 9, bearing reference EPF 294819, address is 117 High Road, Loughton. Members will recall, obviously, the item itself was deferred to allow for a member's site visit. Just before I plough into the presentation, I think I'd like to draw to members' attentions a couple of typos and clarifications. The first clarification is on page 21, and it relates to the development description. Unfortunately, the published report refers to 6 car parking spaces. That's in fact 4 car parking spaces. The second clarification relates to an additional rear elevation plan, drawing number PHEY/22/21, has been provided by the applicant following a member site visit to demonstrate the rear-facing relationship with number 115 High Road. This will appear in, obviously, the presentation in due course. The plan actually will form part of also the submitted drawings for approval, and including also one further amended plan to the first and second floor plans. That's drawing number PHEF/19/SCH2/03 Rev A, which specifically includes detail of a balcony screen at second floor level running adjacent to the boundary of number 115 High Road. That boundary screen relates to flat F. Again, this will be a little clearer when I actually start to present the site. So this is, as members will see on the screen, the actual application site, edged in red. It's number 117. It is a SAC held in abeyance. It's also probably been noted. Just moving on. It is an application that's seeking planning permission for the extension and conversion of the existing property, as can be seen in this aerial image. This is obviously the application site. It sits at the corner of High Road and Meadow Road. And the proposals are for, as I say, the extension and conversion of the existing property to provide in total 6 flats, which comprise of 4 2-beds, 1 3-bed, and 1 1-bed. Please also note that on page 25, there is a typo in the mix there, which refers to flat E and flat F, where they are actually 2-bed units, not 1-bed units, as indicated. There's also parking and turning, including, obviously in the site, you can see here again, parking obviously to the front of the property, and also the rear private amenity of the property itself, which will, as will be seen, become parking at the rear and turning space, etc., with communal amenity along the frontage. Just moving forward. So I won't dwell too much on this. Obviously, site members have actually seen the site now. There's a lot of screening, obviously, to the site, as shown here. Obviously, trees are in, full bloom. These are all protected trees and are retained as part of the proposals. The image also here shows, obviously, those trees without, probably taken in the autumn / winter, obviously showing the trees themselves without the leaves, but obviously exposing the actual application site. These are further images also along that boundary of number 117 on Meadow Road, which shows obviously the existing access to the rear of the property. These are just additional images, obviously, of properties either side of 117, the opposite side of the road, which is 119 High Road, and also 115, which is the immediate pair to the application site. These are existing elevations. It's currently as it is presented. These are also layouts from basement to second floor. These are existing and proposed site layouts comparatively. So you can see obviously the difference. So this is the parking area of 4 parking spaces, obviously the communal areas, private areas so these are the communal areas here to some of the units, and also to a private amenity area for the 3-bed basement flat. Just going to quickly rush through. The main issues to consider here are the principle of the conversion and to provide 6 self-contained flats, design and layout, private amenity space provision, impact on residential amenities, impact on highways and parking, including the SAC, and there are other technical considerations relating to drainage, contamination and waste storage. and refuse collection. Full analysis of each of these planning issues are identified on pages 24 to 28 of the agenda. Just going to run through these elevations. So these are the existing front, this is the proposed front as you'd see the property. The only difference being that this slight projection, which is the side stroke rear extensions here, which commences at this particular point here and extends into the rear garden curtilage here. This is obviously the rear image, which I will show in the next slide, a comparison with number 115 in terms of how the two elevations relate to one another. Here it is. This is 115 High Road, and this will be the rear elevation of 117 High Road. So this is the mix of units. Just to be clear again, the lower ground floor would form a new three-bed flat. At ground floor, there will be two flats, which will be both 2 bedrooms. At first floor, there's an additional 1-bedroom flat and a 2-bedroom flat. That's flats D and E. And flat F being a 2-bed flat itself. These are the elevations. So we have at the top of this image the existing street views of the property as existing, and then we have the street image in the second panorama here, without obviously the wall and the road actually shown. And obviously the final elevations shown below are the elevations onto Meadow Road, of course, with the boundary walls illustrated. So in summary, the officers consider that principle of the extensions and conversion to enable 6 flats comply with the council's planning policy aims and objectives that seek to provide for a range of housing needs in the district. The site is also well located to shops, services and public transport connections. Just to pick up quickly, with regard to quality residential accommodation proposed, the unit size and private amenity standards, all except for flat E at this current stage, would be met and exceeded in most cases. Page 25 of the agenda sets out the maximum proposed GIAs, bearing in mind the amendment I mentioned at the outset of this presentation. Residential amenities of neighbouring occupiers aren't adversely impacted by the proposals. The amended parking provisioning, as requested by officers, achieves a sensible balance between the need to encourage alternative sustainable travel choices and enhancing and retaining green space amenity within the site for its future occupiers. Just to mention again, all TPO trees are retained as part of the proposals, although officers have recommended that tree protection measures be secured as a planning condition. That condition is number 7 and it's on page 30. The impacts on the SAC in terms of air pollution and potential for increased recreational visitor pressures can be mitigated by the relevant planning conditions, part of this recommendation, and additional financial contributions secured under a 106 in accordance with SAC-led interim strategies. The contamination and surface water drainage matters are dealt with by planning conditions. Overall, the application is recommended for approval subject to planning conditions as reported, and a section 106 to secure SAC-related financial contributions. That is the end of the presentation.
Thank you. We have one speaker on this application, which is Tim Parry, the applicant. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Parry.
Regarding this application, the officer's report has clearly demonstrated that we've overcome all the objections. I believe there's been a small negative response. However, I have the support from both my neighbours, 115 and 119 High Road. I appreciate people don't like change, but I do genuinely think that this planning application is in a sustainable location and is not controversial in size and design. I would add that I believe this design is a big improvement on the rear from what was allowed in the 1970s when it was turned into a care home. The original front side aspects remains. The address is High Road and it doesn't impact on the Meadow Road permit scheme. Finally, I believe this location is ideal for this sort of development with amenities and public transport on its doorstep and will fulfil the need for housing with no impact on the town. Currently, this house has 3 occupants. Thank you.
Members, I don't believe there's a ward councillor present. Councillor Kaufman. Sorry, can you turn your...
Oh, sorry.
That's the thing.
Thank you. No, there's unfortunately not a ward councillor present. I'm an adjoining ward member, and I've been asked to sort of chat about this one because there are some merits about it. But I know the site very well, and I've looked at the objections from both the Residents Association Plans Group and also the Town Council, and they are of the opinion that there's insufficient. I understand it's a sustainable location, but there are 12 bedrooms being created here, I believe. So the amount of parking really is insufficient. And if you allow for visitor parking, there isn't any. So there's enormous parking stress. We all know with the school opposite, it's chaos. And most of the side roads, you can't park anywhere anyway because it's all drop curbs. So there's a sort of feeling amongst Residents Association, Town Council, that there's too much being placed on this site. So you have quite compromised residents' amenity space. You have insufficient parking and something that's having to work really, really too hard on the balance of probability to say this is right. It's trying to get too much into this site. I mean, I understand the need for a mix of housing and a mix of tenures. We have got quite a lot of flats in that area anyway. It's not a shortage of flats, actually we're short of housing, just a view. So at the moment I'm concerned, I've listened to what the officers say, but insufficient parking, limited amenity space gives me some cause for concern.
Thank you. Councillor Pond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I called for a site visit to this property because in particular I was worried about the effect on the neighbours in Meadow Road. I wasn't worried about the neighbours in the High Road, one of which is across Meadow Road anyway, and the other of which is Thatcher House. But I've got some residual concerns which remain after the site visit when, having surveyed the current array of nasty box-like accretions on the back of this house, some of my fears were allayed. One issue, first of all, the SAC issue. This is about 200 yards, I suspect, from the nearest point in the SAC, and I believe short of having the explicit assent of the inspector, we should not be consenting schemes which result in a very large increase in the number of dwelling units because of the likely effect on the SAC. It's possible that if the inspector recommends either the interim strategy or another mitigation strategy, we might be able to come back to it. That is still a worry. Secondly, I've not seen in the conditions, and I might be wrong, that any use as a medical facility, which is advertised on a large board in the front of the house, would cease upon consent be given. But I think that is absolutely necessary, that you don't have a consulting room in addition to what we've got. Lastly, I think what we need is an informative on the question of parking, which the applicant raised. It's quite possible that if it were decided to number the new consented flats in Meadow Road, they would become eligible for parking permits in Meadow Road, which is already really, really very heavily parked. So I think we should add an informative that the local planning authority will request the parking authority, which is NEP, not to issue permits in relation to the consented properties, no matter how they are numbered, whether they're numbered in High Road or something standalone or in Meadow Road. But my first concern is still the proximity, I would say perhaps 300 yards from the SAC. I haven't measured it, but that is my principal concern.
Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got a few points to make, actually. I'm also concerned about the lack of parking. I just want some clarity on that because it refers to 4 parking spaces and a disabled parking space. So is the disabled parking space included in the 4 spaces, or is that an additional one? Because otherwise, I think it's 6 flats, so that would leave 3 parking spaces for 6 flats, which is half a parking space per flat, which doesn't seem to be enough to me. So if we could have some clarity on that point. The other issue I've got, or one of the other issues, is that if you look on page 26, towards the top of that page, there's reference to amenity space, and each flat is mentioned in respect of its amenity space. With the exception of flat D, I can't see any reference to amenity space for flat D, so that's another query I've got. And finally, if you go to page 34, item 21, it appears that there's an issue there, which I'd like some clarification on there, which refers to private amenity space for flat E, and that appears as if that's going to be dealt with under officer delegation. Could I have some clarity on the points that I've raised?
Thank you. Could the officer come back on those points before we move on?
I can do, yeah. Concerns obviously the first point about the lack of parking. The disabled parking space does indeed form part of the composite number, which is 4 parking spaces. The amenity space, moving on to the flat D, which, just bear with me, the private amenity space is a balcony, and that is coming off from the living dining area to that property. Of course, all of these properties themselves, each of these properties would have access to the communal amenity spaces to the side of the property which front onto the Meadow Road. And yes, indeed, and it was mentioned in the presentation, flat E itself, we were concerned that no private amenity itself has been indicated as part of the proposals, although in making the recommendation, officers had felt that private amenity by way of the addition of a balcony to secure by that planning condition could easily be achieved.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Wixley?
Well, I did say, going back to the conditions on page 34, I believe it was. I think from what my understanding is on condition 21, we're going to leave that to officer delegation. Is that correct for flat D?
That is the case, yes.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got kind of mixed views on this. When I went on the site visit, it was very clear in my own mind that it didn't impact 117 and 119. Sorry, 115 and 119. As already been mentioned by someone, a distinct improvement on what is at the rear of the existing property. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I've had a good look at Meadow Road, because it's not, unless you're visiting someone, it's not a road that you would go down because it's a cul-de-sac. but I drove down and had a look. I don't think I couldn't see any future sites there where this could act as a precedent. I have to say the property directly opposite, I think it's called Thatcher House, has no obvious architectural merit that we have to worry about. And in fact, it's not a domestic property, is it? It's an office. So on those grounds, I didn't think there was any reason not to support this. But I do have some concerns, like Councillor Pond, about the possible impact on the SAC, because the private amenity space in this proposal is almost non-existent. So you are encouraging those new residents to go elsewhere for that amenity space. And I think Councillor Kaufman did make some important considerations vis-à-vis parking, because people will still have a car on the whole. But I don't know whether those are strong enough reasons for declining this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Owen?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I assume this is not eligible for affordable housing, so I just wanted to understand why, because we're turning a semi-detached house into 5 flats. It's quite big, and certainly for the area it's quite big. So I was wondering why there's no affordable housing. What's the criteria?
The threshold for acquiring affordable housing is currently set in the local plan at 10 units. That's at which point we will consider a contribution or a provision, whether it be a financial contribution or an actual physical on-site provision of affordable housing. The policy is actually, if I remember correctly, let me see. Sorry, apologies.
Okay, thank you. Councillor
Sorry, does that answer the question anyway? I'll give you the policy in a second. It's just bear with me.
Thank you. We're good with the answer. Thank you.
H2.
Councillor Patel. Thank you, Chairman. Just in response to Councillor Murray, Thatcher House is, as its name suggests, is a building of great beauty.
That's a bit of a stretch.
Chairman, before I ask my question, can we have a response to the 2 questions that have been posed by Councillor Kaufman and Councillor Pond, please? Because I think that they're quite material to this application and which way we're likely to go with it.
This is on the consulting room and the parking permits?
No, with regards to the SAC, as mentioned by Councillor Pond, and regarding the parking provision on site.
Okay, just to address obviously the point on the impact SAC, obviously officers are conscious obviously the impacts that they have had, but you know, as members will also be aware, officers have taken a lot of a significant amount of legal advice on our approach to confirming what mitigations we can use, and those are obviously set out in the 2 strategies which the council has adopted for such purposes. I mean, this proposal itself does or has, it is going to be made subject, should members support the scheme this evening, be made subject to securing the financial contributions towards mitigations for both recreation visitor and air pollution. And, you know, that is part and parcel of what we are doing on a regular basis with, you know, significant number of these applications for residential development, residential redevelopment, etc. So that's the first point. In terms of the issue in respect to parking, well, officers have clearly set out why, in its rationale, it feels that, you know, the number of parking spaces are sufficient, or would be, in its opinion, sufficient. I mean, it is a balancing act in terms of trying to ensure sufficient amenity or communal amenity is provided for the number of residential units being proposed, and not to, you know, overburden the site with lots more hard surfacing, etc., and turning areas. which in turn themselves could actually impact on the longevity of the actual protected trees. There's also equally, parking controls within the area itself, and that's been confirmed by our colleagues at Essex County Highways to prevent, obviously, parking within the side roads, which we are, conscious to. There were a lot of residents' objections to the fact that a lot of overspill parking would occur. So we're comfortable in the fact that, the site, whilst, yes, of course, it could, we can't control, parking per se. However, we also need to acknowledge the fact that the site itself is well located to, sustainable transport nodes such as, bus, such as the train station, etc. So, and also local services, we're on the edge of the town centre itself. So, appreciate the concerns around whether sufficient parking has been made. But again, it's one of those cases where we feel that, a balance had to be struck here. And, in terms of obviously leaning towards trying to, provide enough amenity, which I feel is just as important as, providing more parking.
There's also, sorry, Councillor Patel.
Thank you for allowing me to come back. So is it possible then to insert a condition that prevents the occupants from seeking parking permits on Meadow Road, as already indicated with them in the address being given, with it being cited as the high road? Is that enough then to prevent them seeking parking permit?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points that were raised. One is the parking permits or lack of issuing them, the possibility, and also the removal of this consulting room to make sure that's not part of the plan going forward. So are we able to condition those two?
In respect to the future use of any part of this building or any residents here, we can put a control in respect to a consulting room not going back into the residential development for sure. We can do that. In respect to imposing or restricting or providing residence permits for future occupiers, that isn't something we can do. However, we could actually include an informative, be itself. I mean, we are not the Highway Authority, and we can't really be imposing resident permits on future occupiers. That's where we're at, really, in respect to that question. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allgood.
Yeah, can we go back to the rear elevation plan, please? I'm just curious about the balcony and clarification on its viewing of the neighbour, is it 115?
I'll do that in just a second.
So my worry about this is, I appreciate 115 at the moment is either some sort of attic or it has Velux windows. Right, so that property there then extends as a balcony, and they have got, where you're circling, Velux windows that actually overlook the balcony. Now, I appreciate at the moment it might be described as space that's being used for something else, but if in the future they decide to make it residential, then the people in the balcony have a platform to look directly by about half a metre away into the Velux windows. So is there any stipulation or anything to either prevent that? I appreciate at the moment you could argue it's just space in the, I mean, it's looking at this, it's got windows. So if you extend it as a balcony, which they can then walk onto a platform, they are looking directly into the neighbour's house, and they're about half a metre away at the most, I think.
I think the drawing actually says it's obscure glass and they're fixed shut, and if the use changed in the future.
It's a Velux window, so when you open them, it's not a case of...
It says they're fixed shut on the drawing.
So just to clarify, if you don't mind, Chairman, sorry, just to come in on this one, there's two things here. I appreciate the Councillor's concern regarding the impact on private amenity as a result of the balcony being proposed there. And that is why a obscure glass screen of 1,700, 1.7 metres in height, would be installed along that boundary to ensure any mutual overlooking is prevented, because we've got to remember overlooking is a mutual thing here. Also to kind of, from my own digging around on the old records themselves, and whilst I haven't actually been into the roof here of the neighbouring property, but those Velux windows are actually serving 2 en-suites, and one of them, I believe, is also serving a staircase. I do believe they are openable, because, that would be silly of me to deny that, because I did see at the site visit with members that I believe one of them were open at the time. The applicant here has indicated that they would be obscure glazed and fixed shut. I mean, they are certainly obscure glazed, but there were no details at the time of actually granting this to say they would be fixed shut, and there isn't anything there. The applicant has advised me in writing that, he has spoken to his neighbour, and they have advised that they would fix shut their Velux windows. But nevertheless, notwithstanding that, whether that happens, I mean, that's not something we can control as part of this planning application. The bit that we can control, and the bit we can, give ourselves some comfort with, is the fact that there is an obscure glazed screen that would be installed along that boundary, which would prevent any mutual overlooking from the use of that balcony.
Thank you. Councillor Sunga.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My main concern would have been the visitors' parking, and I think that on page 26, under highways and parking, it says that the application initially proposed 6 parking spaces, and then it was reduced. Could the officer let us know whose recommendation was that to reduce it from 6 to 4? That's my first question. And secondly, if highways are not objecting to this, and it's actually aligning itself with ST6 of the local version, local plan, submersion version, local plan 2017. I don't see how we could object to this application if we're trying to do it on the merits of visitors parking. Thank you.
Thank you. I think...
Just to confirm, yes, it was at the request of officers to reduce the parking, as explained earlier in a related question, was that we're seeking to strike that adequate balance with additional communal amenity within the site for the future residents and sustainable access to transport, other transport modes within the locality.
Members, we've had a lengthy debate. I think Councillor Pond wanted to come. I believe you were asking for an informative...
Yes, I'm not asking for a condition. I know we can't condition it, but it would be for an informative that the local planning authority has requested the height of the parking authority, not to grant.
I understand. Councillor Allgood, is it a new point?
Yeah, it's a new point. One of the objections suggested that if we do allow this to go ahead, that we either insist or at least ask for electric vehicles only or hybrids, rather than either sole petrol or diesel.
I don't think that's anything we can actually, if the officers would like to comment, I don't think that's anything we can do in planning.
Sorry, would you like me to come back
please,
on that?
Please do on that one, and then we're going to go to a vote, absolutely.
Yeah, unfortunately, it wouldn't basically pass, the test for including conditions. However, the condition itself that is actually included does seek to encourage that, and we would be seeking to ensure that adequate EV provisioning within that site is actually made for those people that, or the future occupiers that do wish to take up EV.
Thank you. Members, we have the officer's recommendation for granting. We have a condition on the consulting room to add, and we have an informative on the parking permits in Meadow Road. Can I please go to a vote on the recommendation to grant this application? Those members in favour, please show.
Nine.
And those against?
Seven.
Abstentions?
1.
Members, permission is granted on that application. Thank you. Moving on, item 10, EPF 247220, 91 Queen's Road.
Thank you, Chair. This is also an application I shall present. 91 Queen's Road again. As members will be fully aware, the item was deferred following late submission of information that was brought to our attention, which we hadn't obviously had an opportunity to consider. I'll just represent the site itself, just as a quick recap. This is 91 Queen's Road, fairly substantial property, equidistance from the high roads on either side. It's pretty much middling along Queen's Road itself in Buckhurst Hill. Proposals for two semi-detached 5-bedroom properties and single-storey garden rooms at the rear. Again, to refresh memories, I mean, this is the actual plot itself. So an existing, I'm assuming that's some kind of orangery of some kind of greenhouse at the rear of the property. Obviously, this is the core of the original property itself, which has then since been added to and extended over time. The single-storey additional garage, which is more modern in Advent, is actually to the front. These are just some examples of the mixed nature of properties along here. This is the existing elevations and layout of the existing property. The proposed elevations for the proposed semi-detached pair. These are the ground to roof layouts effectively. This is the semi-detached pair in context of obviously the existing neighbours to either side of it, its relationship with them. And this is the existing proposed landscaping scheme shown there. So just really coming back to the issue that was raised, the third-party information relating to the worthiness of the building as a non-designated heritage asset or locally listed building. That was the purpose for obviously the deferral. Members will have noted from the inclusion of the third-party information and subsequent advice from our council senior conservation officer are included as appendices to the actual published report. As I say, the application has been recommended for conditional approval, also set out in the agenda itself. There isn't anything further to add, and I'll just end the presentation there and allow for questions to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member. There's no speakers on this item. Councillor Patel, you're one of the ward councillors, as am I. Is there anything you wish to?
Chairman, I'll just keep this very short. I'll just echo the comments that I made at the last meeting. I welcome this application. I think it's going to tidy up the property and add to the street scene. There's 2 off-street parking spaces for each house, which again is welcome. So I'll be supporting this application.
Thank you. Councillor Pond.
Well, Chairman, as you won't be surprised to hear, I respectfully disagree with the Conservation Officer. The National Planning Policy Framework is very clear on heritage assets, whether they're designated or not designated. And paragraph 189 of the NPPF says that heritage assets vary from sites of purely local interest, buildings of local interest, to those of very great national, international value. But the judgment of paragraph 189 is the same, and they should all be considered for protection. Now, what I would like to say about the Conservation Officer's opinion is that probably the Conservation Officer does not know as much about individual properties in Buckhurst Hill as the author referred to as third party, who is Lynn Jones, whose forthcoming book on the buildings of Buckhurst Hill will accompany her 2 published books, both of which have been received very well. Now, not every heritage asset is pretty, and I, for one, don't consider this house as a particularly beautiful attraction in the streetscape. I wouldn't resist granting planning permission on those grounds. But I would say that the NPPF is quite clear that we should retain genuine heritage assets, whether designated or not. What we are faced with here is, do we replace a rather small and not particularly prominent building, which is a genuine Victorian building, probably the oldest in Queen's Road, with 2 very large pastiche Victorian villas? I don't think the design of what is proposed is too bad, but I do not think, in consideration of Paras 189 to 205 of the framework, that we should be consenting the removal of an undesignated heritage asset. And I believe it is an undesignated heritage asset. And if, as I hope, we refuse this application, I am quite happy to have the necessary evidence laid before the inspector at a public inquiry or by written representations. So, Mr. Chairman, if I can find a seconder, I would like to move a motion arising out of this, that the committee regard 91 Queen's Road as an undesignated heritage asset within the definition of paragraph 189 MPPF, which is desirable to repair and retain. And I would move a second reason for refusal, which is that it is within 300 yards of the Knighton Wood corner of the special area of conservation, and the addition of 1 house would add to, because of the provision of parking spaces, would add to pressures on the SAC.
Thank you. As one of the ward councillors, I have a great respect for Lynn Jones, but I find it obscure that we have a 4-page report on the property, and it's 4 lines about the actual building, and 2 of those say it probably would have had. So it's actually saying it's been changed over, a great amount since it was actually built. I see no merit in retaining this building whatsoever in its form. I think I made that clear at the last meeting. We have an office, we have an extensive response from the heritage officer, conservation officer. I think the officers have suggested we grant approval for this application. Sorry. I would be supporting this application. I've got Councillor Sungar that wants to speak, and then Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Pond, we had a debate, a very long debate, I must say, at the last meeting, and I think you had the opportunity to present your findings to our conservation officer, and can I say senior conservation officer of EFDC. Members did debate this in quite length, and I think it was all pivoting on your report to the senior conservation officer. He has quite clearly done his due diligence here and set in Appendix A on page 43, set out and addressed all of the concerns. I will also be supporting this application for approval, and I think we should consider the applicant who has actually had to wait for this long to get this building developed, and for the benefit of the living. Thank you.
Councillor Ritzy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to, without wanting to dwell too much on the specifics, but I think I'm grateful to Councillor Pond from our last meeting to bring the historical merits of this property before members. And I think the Senior Conservation Officer's report is quite clear, and I think it's very much a case that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This property, whilst it enjoys some historical significance, it hasn't been designated as a local heritage site. And I think it's very noble of the applicant to acknowledge that and acknowledge the historical context of it with awarding a plaque. But I think I'm inclined to agree with yourself, Chairman. I don't see any merit as retaining it in its current form.
Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to make one point, that the area has been surveyed twice, and if it was felt that it should have been marked as a non-designated heritage asset, it's been 10 years to bring it forward and suggest that it's reconsidered. It's not being brought forward. I, like you, Chairman, also know Lynn Jones very well, and respect her knowledge on Buckhurst Hill. However, there's been ample opportunity to bring this forward previously, and I think the officer's report clearly states the reasons why it doesn't feel it should be considered.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley, sorry, you indicated earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just a couple of things. Sorry, I just wonder if we could get the replacement buildings up. I think the presentation was quite short, and I think I've missed what's being proposed in place.
Of
Can the
course,
officer do
just
that?
bear with me.
Can the officer point out the replacement houses? Right. Okay. I just got another query on this. I've never seen this before on a planning application, but I'm a bit curious. On page 36, if you move up from the bottom, it refers to each dwelling house will be provided with a garden stroke gym. Now, is it a garden or is it a gym? If it's a gym, does that give rise to a further application, or is that included in this? I'm a bit confused by that. I've never seen anything like that before.
The actual buildings themselves will be for the exclusive use or incidental, if you wish to call that, in planning terms, or planning speak rather, to each unit itself. As to their end use, as I say, it wouldn't go beyond. They wouldn't become, so to speak, commercial gyms or anything. It will be ultimately personal to the future occupiers of those dwellings. We could always, include a condition to ensure that their use is strictly incidental if there are concerns in that respect.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, then I'll go back to Councillor Pond to finish.
Yeah, I don't know whether you were looking for a seconder for Councillor Pond's motion, but I certainly would want to second that, because I'm not prepared to see the loss of this important heritage.
Thank you. We have a proposal. Sorry, Councillor Kaufman.
Sorry, I want to carry due process first. I think, should we hear the proposal first, or should I speak first?
Well,
we've
the
heard
motion has been made, so you can speak.
We've heard the proposal.
Okay, so I think we should support Councillor Pond. I'm pleased that Councillor Murray has seconded it. We need to go through that due process. I understand my colleagues on the front bench and their views, but we do have an expert far in excess of our own council conservation officer or heritage officer sitting next to me. Dr. Chris Pond, OBE, knows more about it than anyone. So that's just to make that clear. That's why I feel I would have seconded the motion. This is a matter of great importance, and I would have preferred it would have gone to an inspector for a decision that way. I think it has that much merit because it is one of the oldest houses in Buckhurst Hill. It's not a thing of beauty, unfortunately. And what I understand, and I don't want to sort of upset anyone, I believe there's not been an update of the Buckhurst Hill register of buildings for 10 years. I think that's correct, and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm incorrect. If there hasn't been one for 10 years, then errors like this can happen. And on my watch, a fantastic building in Chigwell was taken down, completely wrong, because we didn't do our job properly. So I want to make sure I don't make that mistake again.
Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. Just coming back to the point that Councillor Kaufman has made, both the properties either side of this property have been designated. So there's obviously it was considered twice previously whether it should be designated or not, and it was deemed not to.
There has been a previous planning application on this site in, I think, 2018. I don't think it was raised at that point either. But yeah, can I just ask how we go about this particular motion? Is it a vote?
It would be a vote, yes.
Okay.
I think so. Do you want to propose it and take a vote on it?
Can we go through the proposal again?
The motion.
Sorry. Yes, please. Yes,
right.
Thank you.
The committee regard St Helena Villa number 91 Queen's Road as an undesignated heritage asset within the definition of paragraph 189 of the National Planning Policy Framework, which is desirable to retain, repair. And the second reason is because of the proximity of the special area of conservation, Knighton Wood, within 300 yards of the site. So those would be the reasons for refusal.
So we have a proposal for refusal seconded by Councillor Murray. All those in favour of that motion, please show.
Eight.
All those against?
Seven.
Abstentions? That motion has been carried. Yeah, I'm standing up as well. That application will now go to DDMC with a recommendation for refusal from this committee. Correct. Thank you. Moving on, members, item 11, EPF 017221, 5 Grange Crescent.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so item 11 is number 5 Grange Crescent in Chigwell. The proposal before members tonight is for outline plan and permission for the demolition of an existing dwelling and the erection of a replacement to provide for 5 new flatted dwellings. The application is before tonight's committee due to an objection from the parish council as well as neighbouring residents, and officers are recommending that outline planning permission is granted. So starting with the application site, the site is located on Grange Crescent, which is within the built-up area of Chigwell. So this is the application site here. Yep, just make sure my pointer's on. This is the application property. Sorry, this one is the application property. Located to the north is Grange Hill Underground Station, which offers fairly regular services into London. There's also a bus stop, which offers reasonably regular bus routes on Manor Road and beyond. Towards the northern part of the site on Manor Road itself is a small parade of shops, including food outlets, dry cleaners, and in the wider context of the area, there is an existing and quite prominent set of flats on this corner as well. So currently on the site is a two-storey semi-detached property, which is situated within a reasonably spacious plot. And just to give a little bit more context, Grange Crescent has quite a mix of different architectural styles, uses of materials, etc. And just to put it onto some plan form, this is the existing site plan. Members will see that the adjoining neighbour has been extended quite substantially previously, as has the other side, the other adjacent neighbour. So it's quite a small property in its context. So as I said, the proposed development is for outline plan and permission to demolish the existing house and to erect a new building to deliver 5 new flatted dwellings. The development is proposed as an outline consent, with matters relating to appearance, layout and landscaping all reserved for determination at a subsequent time. So matters relating to scale, so the dimensions, the size of the building that's being proposed, as well as the access, are to be considered as part of this application. So in terms of its scale, the proposal, as I said before, I mean, it's similar to, it has the same ridge height as the adjoining neighbour, and it is similar to the adjacent neighbour as well. So it's not out of scale, it's not out of context for this area of Grange Crescent. It proposes, again, this is an indicative in terms of design, but it does propose to leave a gap of about 1.1 metres to the shared boundary with this neighbour. And as this, again, I stress that it is an indicative because that is, we're talking detailed design, but the hip style of that roof mirroring the neighbour just reduces that potential for a terracing effect in the wider street scene. So these are, just to complete the picture, these are the existing and proposed rear elevations. Both neighbours have got a conventional type of existing extension, rear dormer windows, they're commonplace. The new building proposes, from this indicative drawing, to have a single-storey element adjacent to the neighbour, and will also include a dormer as well, similar to them. So the single-storey element will project marginally beyond the rear of number 7. Such a small projection is not going to cause significant harm to the living conditions of that neighbour, particularly when you consider that the garden is quite wide and long. The first floor element adjacent to the other adjacent neighbour, it will marginally exceed the rear building line. However, it's not going to cause significant harm for similar reasons. A total of 4 off-street car parking spaces are proposed, and that's the maximum that could be achieved, so clearly not enough for one per dwelling. However, as I said at the start, the proximity to Grange Hill Station, as well as the relatively regular bus services on Manor Road, leads officers to conclude that that level of parking is appropriate for this location. Incidentally, there are parking restrictions on Grange Crescent as well to stop commuter parking as well. As part of this indicative layout, as I said, layout is a matter reserved, but as part of this, the ground floor flat is a relatively large one. It's designed for a family, and so a private amenity space is proposed, is shown on this indicative layout. The rest of the dwellings will have access to this shared area. So the indicative layout drawings indicate that each of the new flats would meet the nationally described space standards, which ranges from the large 145 square metre family dwelling in flat 1 to the 38 square metre studio flat on the first floor. So drawing everything together, officers are recommending that outline plan permission is granted, subject to the Section 106 legal agreement to secure the necessary financial contributions towards the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation, and subject to the conditions set out in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no speakers on this application, but Councillor Lyon is one of the ward councillors.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I did ask for a site visit on this particular application so that members could actually see the extent of development in this particular area. It's highly congested in terms of development. The flats that were described, the back gardens have in fact been extended and developed into business units. There's been 2 additional houses built on some space alongside, and some of the houses adjacent to this one have been extended, extensively extended. I object to the officer's comment or wish to qualify. Grange Hill is on a loop line. There are very few direct trains into London, and there are virtually no buses. I think there's one local bus that goes from Grange Hill Station, but only around the area. So, and the point I would like to make about parking is, although we can legislate for not having parking spaces, we can't legislate for people not having cars. And in this particular area, because I live probably a half a mile away, I know that they will have cars. The area is heavily congested as far as parking is concerned. There's double yellow lines which are abused regularly, and people parking on that for the shops. And Also, I think that there is a question on the development of a flatted development on an existing semi-detached house, and actually demolishing that house and rebuilding it is obviously going to have a detriment to the neighbour. So I really feel this is a step too far and would not be supporting this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bond.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I also wanted to correct the officer because he said there was a direct service to London. There are 2 trains a day that connect Grange Hill with London. The others terminate either at Woodford or Hainault. So I think that has to be made, that point has to be made. Mr. Chairman, I think this is a preposterous proposal. To demolish a modest 3-bedroom semi-detached house, admittedly in poor state of repair, and then substitute it with a soaking of development, flatted development, quite alien to the neighbour. The neighbour will be I speak with some knowledge on this because I live next door to a building site at the moment. It was scheduled to go on from the 1st of June till Christmas. It has been absolute hell. This man is actually attached to the proposal to demolish the modest semi-detached house. I mean, I think this is simply overdevelopment of a smallish site and pouring not a quart into a pint pot, but a gallon. So I think if Councillor Lyon is proposing a motion to refuse this application, I would be delighted to support him.
Councillor Brooks.
You remember the Councillor Wagland herself, who did a lot of planning, legal work, commenting on her concerns about the flatfication of Loughton. But when I walked up and down this street in Chigwell, which, believe it or not, one does visit occasionally, but I don't know intimately. First, I had to walk up and down it because I couldn't find anywhere to park. So I did have a close look at the dwellings on this street, and I couldn't see, to my untrained eye, any other dwelling that seemed to be split into flats. So we not only have 5, which does seem an overdevelopment, but this is a semi-detached house, as one of my colleagues has already said, on a modest plot. And I just think that it really does not fit in with the street and the area.
Thank you. Councillor Ritzy.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So whilst this isn't directly in my ward, it's in the neighbouring ward of Grange Hill, and I know this site very well. I regularly frequent the shopping parade and the barber shop there, so if anybody wants to get a very bad haircut, it's the place to go to. But in all seriousness, I think this is a completely inappropriate development. I think a semi-detached property, whilst it is very modest, it clearly cannot take 5 flats there. I think the knock-on pressure that it would have on on-street parking on Grange Crescent will be hugely detrimental. In actual fact, I think it will affect parking capacity for the parade of shops there, and actually will have a knock-on effect on some of the businesses. It's a very, very dangerous junction to turn out from. I know certainly in the last probably 12 months alone, there's been probably half a dozen accidents which have caused a complete standstill to Manor Road, because it obviously turns out onto Manor Road. So I think a lot has been discussed on this, and I think before last month when it was coming before committee, there was obviously objectors and speakers on this. So I think it's certainly an overdevelopment. I think it's out of keeping, and most importantly, actually, on a final point, it serves to stand as a dangerous precedent for all of the other semi-detached properties if we're minded to let this go through. Thank you.
Councillor Sonia.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I'll echo what Councillor Rizzo just said. Councillor Brooks, you are welcome to come to Chigwell anytime. I'm happy to escort you around. It's a nice place. Just based on the parking alone, Chairman, in Chigwell, most houses, most dwellings have off-street, they have their dropped curbs. So even having to find a space is difficult because most people park in front of their houses. I'm not really liking the design. It's quite a bulky design as well, and having an extra 5 flats will just be in more intensification of the area. I, like Councillor Lyme, will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Murray, and I think that we'll then go to some form of vote.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Not a major contribution. I just wanted to say I thought this was totally inappropriate. We've got more than enough inappropriate developments in Chigwell. We don't need to add another.
Thank you for that. Members, I think we're... Sorry, Councillor Wixley.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm not going to comment on what's been said. I'd just like to ask a general question. I'm a bit curious about condition number 8, which refers to a scheme to enhance the ecological value of the site, etc. I just wonder what it was about this site which warranted that condition, because we don't get that sort of condition that often. So I don't know if the officer could enlighten me in a sort of general sense.
Yeah, so it's a requirement to have a biodiversity net gain for these types of developments, so it would be put on other types of developments of this sort as well.
Councillor Wixley.
Well, that's interesting, because I don't think I noticed such a condition when we were talking about 117 the High Road in Loughton, which of course is also flats.
Councillor Lyon.
Can I make a proposal for refusal of this application?
Thank you.
I propose that we consider overdevelopment, inadequate parking, and not fitting in with the street scene in the particular area. It's quite unattractive in terms of building flats in a semi-detached road. Yeah, well, precedents I don't think we can necessarily consider, but certainly it's not appropriate for flats in essentially a residential area.
Councillor Sunga has seconded. Councillor Pond, you're just seconded. Thank you. Members, we have a motion for refusal that's been seconded. All those in favour of that?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. That application has been refused. Thank you, members. We don't have to go through with a way forward in the current scheme of things, so we won't be going that route. Item 12, members, EPF 008022, 2 Green Lane, Chigwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so item 12, 2 Green Lane in Chigwell. The proposal is for the conversion of an existing attached garage into a habitable room. Application is before members tonight due to an objection from the parish council as well as a neighbour, and officers are recommending that planning permission is granted. So the site is located on Green Lane. Sorry, let me just turn my laser pointer. There we go. So it's located on Green Lane, which is just off Vicarage Lane when it curves around. It's quite a difficult road to see, but it is right on that corner. As you can see, the site is located within the boundaries of the Metropolitan Greenbelt. And to give you an idea, this is the red line site, just to give an idea of the curtilage. And this is the existing elevation. So this is the two-storey house, and this is the garage that it serves. And the proposal is to convert the attached garage into a habitable room. And I mean, clearly some minor external alterations are required to facilitate that. So conventional residential looking windows, etc. Planning permission is required due to a condition being attached on the original consent in 1991 that stated that it should be used for the parking of cars. And this is the existing front elevation photograph. And this is the area of land immediately adjacent to the existing garage. It's clear that there is enough space to park cars, so the loss of the garage isn't going to cause an adverse effect on existing parking situation or lead to on-street parking. And finally, this is the proposed floor plan that just shows the attached garage will be turned into a living room to be used ancillary to the main house. So in summary, therefore, officers are recommending that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions set out in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have one speaker on this application, Donna Bregman, who is an objector. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
You can stay seated if you're more
Okay, thank you. We sent photographs, I hope you've all received them, which the photograph there wasn't representative of what happens every day on Green Lane. So I'm representing myself and my husband of 1 Green Lane, and we object to this conversion of the existing garage into a living space at number 2. As has already been, and I won't go over this again, but Green Lane is one of the oldest lanes in Essex. It's a bridle path and it's a public right-of-way within the Metropolitan Green Belt. It's used frequently by members of the community for walks, horse riding and cyclists. And there's a pair of 2 semi-detached cottages there. The applicant at number 2 has made the use of the lane outside his property difficult for all users for many years, including refuse lorries, postal deliveries and any other users that wish to park or turn around, which wasn't shown in that photograph, but is in your photographs that we've sent you. For example, the septic tank, which is situated on the lane, has had a defective cover for many years, and the applicant has not seen fit to make it safe, but instead painted a warning sign informing people not to park, walk, drive or ride over it, as it has a limited weight-bearing load of 250 kilos maximum. See the photograph that we sent. This affects the parking spaces available and restricts free movement on the lane. In addition, the applicant has, in their efforts to discourage the free movement of vehicles, placed logs, bricks, paving stones, again see the photographs, at strategic places along the lane adjoining number 2. The car that is untaxed, uninsured and without MOT, and again wasn't seen on that photograph, has been parked in the same position for the last 10 years plus, thus preventing the free movement of vehicles and taking up an additional parking space. If we consider the local planning authority's standards to ensure that satisfactory off-street parking is maintained and most importantly highway safety is upheld, the above points quite clearly demonstrate that this inappropriate behaviour is a safety hazard to the public and does not comply with health and safety standards and the provision of parking spaces as set out by the local planning authority. In addition, where the planning officer has stated that there is sufficient on-street parking, we feel they have failed to acknowledge and consider the loss of parking spaces due to the abandoned car owned by the applicant and the broken septic tank, in addition to all the other obstacles that you see in your photographs. Therefore, we believe that this is very unreasonable to approve the change of use of a garage, which actually has a condition on it, into a living space when directly outside the garage sits an unused, untaxed, uninsured vehicle on land that does not belong to the applicant and is a public space. Common sense would say that this unused car should be kept in a garage or removed along with all the other obstacles. Furthermore, when considering the impact to the Greenbelt, which both local and district council seek to protect, the issues we raise are detrimental and inappropriate to the nature of Greenbelt. However, we are not, we feel really passionate about our objection because this is our lived reality every day. However, we would be willing to compromise and withdraw our objection with regards to the change of use of the garage if the above points we have raised are taken into consideration and the council places conditions on the applicant to rectify the issues we have raised and guarantees that this cannot reoccur in the future. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. We have a ward councillor, Councillor Bernhardt.
Thank you very much. And thank you for speaking up. The first thing is I think there's obviously, which I think has been identified, but just making sure that all the councillors are aware that the objection refers to both the existing garage into a living space and an outbuilding. But I think the officer has corrected that point, that this is only in relation to the conversion of a garage into a living space. It's obviously very good points have been raised. I think what my challenge at this stage is differentiating between what is a planning concern and what isn't a planning concern. And that's where my real kind of challenge is at this moment in time. I think the green belt is a good point. However, my understanding is any further change will not impact the footprint that's currently in place. So just putting that to one side, in terms of the highway consideration, I do know the road very well. I don't live on the road, but I am aware of it. I understand that highways aren't as concerned as to the distinction. Now, of course, if there are things parked in the wrong place, that is an issue. I don't know whether that's a condition that we can impose. I'm not sure whether that is a planning concern. But where I'm going with this is I personally, purely on planning grounds, and I appreciate I don't live on the road, I don't see a massive issue with it. And I'm not minded to object to it. But it would be interesting to see what other members have to say about it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Sunga.
Thank you, Chairman. Green Lane, if I'm right, does it not fall in Chigwell Village? It's on Chigwell Road, isn't it? Sorry? It's actually Chigwell Village. It's Chigwell Road. It's Chigwell Village.
There's 4 houses, I think, that come into Chigwell Road.
Sorry, okay, no. Right, I think Councillor Bonner, being what he does for a living, has picked up on some of the technical issues here with the restricted covenant. In relation to this, for the face of it, if you think about it, having the garage removed and that turned into residential doesn't really affect the parking, because there's ample parking. However, what I do have an issue with, if you want to call it an issue or a concern, is that there was a condition attached according to the neighbours in 1991, and I'd like the planning officer to confirm on what basis he's trying to get around the condition, because quite clearly, if there is a condition saying you can't turn that into, it's got to be maintained for purpose of car vehicles, how has he managed to get around that point? If you could address that first, please. Thank you, Chairman.
So planning policy has changed quite substantially since the 90s. I don't know the exact reason why that condition was initially put on, but what the question is before members is whether, under current policy, the current policy context, whether the reversion or the use of this building for habitable space, will that cause any material harm in terms of planning considerations, as Councillor Bannott said as well, which is because there is ample parking around the site, it's not going to lead to a proliferation of on-street parking. And regarding the Greenbelt, there is no extension of built form, and I'm digressing a little, but it's not an extension of built form, it's merely a conversion of an existing structure. So it's not an inappropriate development in Greenbelt terms either.
Councillor
Sorry, I've already highlighted that we've actually lost 2 parking spaces, one because of the septic tank defective cover.
I'm really sorry, this isn't a debate. I'm really sorry. We can't go into a debate across the floor. Thank you. Councillor Pond.
Thank you, Chairman. I have the utmost sympathy with the Speaker. It's obvious that inappropriate use is being made of the neighbour's property, and that he's not abided by the terms of the 1991 Planning Commission. But I take Councillor Ritz's point that unfortunately we are constrained on what we can refuse applications on. So I'm wondering if we do have to consent this application, whether we could, or you could, Chairman, make the position to the head of planning that he should consider issuing very swiftly a Section 215 notice against the use of the land by the neighbour for inappropriate purposes. And Section 215 notices deal with land which is untidy or being used in an irresponsible way. So I rather fear, as Councillor Ritzie said, we haven't got much alternative to consent this application, but I do feel very strongly that the Speaker had right on her side.
Councillor Ritzie, then I'm going back to Councillor Wixley, I believe.
Thank you. Just to correct Councillor Pond, it was my fellow Chigwell councillor colleague, Councillor Bannott, who is contributing first. I was looking up, Chairman, just in terms of the ward boundaries, and Green Lane, the cottage end of it, and this is more of a technical point for the benefit of members, Green Lane, the cottages actually fall within the Chigwell Village ward at the moment, and this particular site actually does fall within Chigwell Road. So it's a technical point, but it's just for the benefit of members. Thank you.
Councillor Wixley.
Well, I was hoping to shed some light on the point which has just been raised, because I've just realised that there appear to be 2 green lanes in Chigwell. One is off the high road, and then I've discovered tonight there's actually one off Vicarage Lane, which isn't shown on my map. But I think that illustrates the point that I tried to make to all councillors, that we do need the street maps attached to these planning applications, because then I would have known instantly that I was looking at the right green lane and not the wrong green lane.
Yep, I did both, Councillor Wixley. So, Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chairman. No intention of speaking whatsoever on this, but I would like to propose a motion to defer this application until we have a response on Councillor Pond's suggestion that we have a Section 215, which traditionally the Council are reluctant to do, but maybe the applicant, if they've got common sense, and they're notified that this matter has been deferred, because we cannot turn it down because it's not necessarily a planning ground, blurred edge, and we want to know that can some of these concerns be resolved through the 215 notice, and perhaps by the time we come back, some items will have improved on site.
Yeah, I think we're conflating 2 different subjects here. I really do, but yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Is that something that has merit?
It's, I agree with you, Chairman. I think this is a separate issue. I think if an enforcement complaint were to be raised regarding that issue, that is a separate matter to the application in front of members.
I see. Councillor Lyon, I believe you wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I walk this route quite frequently because it cuts across fields, and Green Lane is one road, but it runs on the London Loop and therefore is untarmacked. I do sympathise with the comments made by the objector. There has been a car there for a long time, but that is not a planning reason, unfortunately, nor is the septic tank issue a planning reason. So we can't consider that, although I do feel that if there is some sort of condition on the property, we need to be aware of that. It doesn't change the footprint, it's only a change to the existing use of the building, so it's difficult to object to it. So I think on balance, the only issue we have is it's on green belt, but I can't see how we can object to it.
Thank you, members. I did visit the site and I understand exactly what the objectors said. I saw it, and I've changed to a very small car, and I had serious difficulty getting out of there and turning around, and had the assistance of the objector's husband to get me out of there. But again, I really stress this is a planning committee, and I think we would lose any appeal in a millisecond. On planning grounds, I find it, I'm really, really conflicted, but on planning grounds, I can find no reason at all to refuse it. But I do like the idea of the Section 215, and I think we have to pursue that. So members, reluctantly, there is the officer's proposal for granting permission. All those in favour of that, please show. Unfortunately, those
14.
against? Those against? Abstentions?
3.
Members, that application is granted with a strong recommendation that we approach a Section 215 notice on the property to improve the problems you've highlighted. Thank you, members.
And may we ask you, Chairman, to relay that to the Director of Planning?
I will indeed, yeah. Thank Moving on, members, the time is ticking. Item 13, EPF 0414/22, 17 Lodge Close, Chigwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so 17 Lodge Close in Chigwell. The proposed development is for a two-storey side extension and a part single, part two-storey rear extension to an existing dwelling. The application is before tonight's committee due to an objection from the Parish Council and a neighbour, and officers are recommending that planning permission is granted. So starting with the application site, switch to my laser pen. So yeah, as I said, it's Lodge Close, which is within the area of Chigwell. If you followed this road up, it leads to Lambourne Road to the north, and the site is located within the boundaries of the Metropolitan Greenbelt. So here are a selection of photographs. So the site is shown on the front elevation here. You can see, I mean, this is a very typical design for this area of Chigwell, and all of these dwellings have the same architectural language and use of materials and form a coherent cul-de-sac. So this photograph illustrates the existing staggered relationship that the application site has with the neighbour. So number 18 is set closer to the road than the application site. And then if we look at the other side, number 16 is set further back than the application site, and so on, as we see as we go to number 14, etc. down the road. So as I said, the proposed development is to erect a two-storey side extension, which leaves a metre to the shared boundary with the neighbour, which, as I said, is closer to Lodge Close than the application property. This drawing helpfully illustrates how it would fit in with the street scene. And turning to the other parts of the proposal, as I said, it has a part single-storey rear extension, which is this element here. This element has been designed to be positioned adjacent to number 18, which is further forward. So any potential impact on that neighbour would be exacerbated. So keeping the first floor element away from that is good for their living conditions. The net projection is relatively long when it comes to that relationship. But if I just flick back to the photographs, the existing property does have a conservatory already, and whilst the extension does project slightly further out, it has been designed so that it has a minimal level of height closest to the boundary, and then it has quite a slack pitch that pitches away just to try and to safeguard their living conditions. So regarding the Greenbelt, an exception to inappropriate forms of development as set out in the MPPF and our local plan is that extensions can be acceptable provided they're not disproportionate. The proposal would make the dwelling approximately 35% larger than the original, which is considered to be a proportionate extension to this dwelling. So the two-storey side element that I talked about, it will adjoin the existing two-storey flank rear elevation, and when we take a 45-degree line from the closest habitable room of number 18, which is again, as I said, set further forward, it's not going to be intercepted by this small extension in terms of its width. So since that's not going to be intercepted, it's not considered that there's going to be significant harm to their living conditions as a result of loss of outlook or loss of light. Regarding the two-storey projection, which is adjacent to the other house, the other side, that will actually be in line with the existing rear building line of number 16. So there's going to be no, I mean, they won't see it from their first floor windows, so it's not going to cause them any harm. And finally, this is a block plan which just illustrates the proposed extensions to the property against the existing. As I said, this helpfully highlights the existing conservatory that's there. And as I said, when we look at the side element, the two-storey element stops where the existing rear building line is, and then all of this section here is single-storey. And so, given that the existing conservatory is there, it does leave a gap to the boundary, in summary, officers are concluding that it's not going to cause significant harm to living conditions of the neighbours. The design is respectful to the prevailing character of the area, and therefore it is recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, there's no speaker on this application, so the ward councillor, I hope, is Councillor Bannott.
Yeah, this is absolutely in my ward. Thank you very much. Just a quick point of clarification. One of the objections says that it's a HMO, and then in terms of the officer's report, it says it is noted that this is a HMO property. Now, I've knocked on that door countless times, and I've never had the impression it's a HMO. So, is there any way of clarifying that point? Is there a license or anything in place, or anything?
I don't know if there's a licence in place. There isn't a planning permission in place because you don't need planning permission for up to 7. So it could. I don't know whether its licence is the honest.
I wonder whether this might be able to be deferred, because the reason I say that is because it's at odds of my understanding of this house and this road. And I think it would make a fundamental difference, in my view, if it actually is a HMO, and this extension will then result in another bedroom, more bathrooms, because this is actually a very quiet road. The average age of this road is about 65. 3/4 of this road are retired. The majority of them have lived there for more than 25 to 30 years. It would make it for me, it's actually a material concern if it is a HMO, because for all the times I've been knocking on the door, that's not been my understanding of the property. And whether it's subject to a licence.
If I could just come back on that. It being an HMO doesn't necessarily need planning permission. These proposed extensions, it's not proposed to increase the number of people living in the property. But even if it were up to that threshold, that element wouldn't need planning permission. So essentially what members are considering are the extensions and how they impact on the street scene and the living conditions of the neighbour. Because the HMO, as I said, up to that threshold wouldn't need consent.
Okay. I mean, I would have... So there's no... Planning is one thing and licensing, I guess, is another. It's a pretty big... I mean, 7 people living there. I would have thought it would have at least needed a licence. Is that incorrect, then, my view on that? Or is that not something you can answer?
Yeah, sorry to say, that's beyond my...
Can I just come in here? I may have to disagree with our planning officer here, being that I do what I do for a living. 5 or more people living in a house constitutes to a HMO, house of multiple occupation. Therefore, if the Article 4 direction was to be followed by the local authority, it would require planning permission.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to follow up on the point that my ward colleague has mentioned and Councillor Bannott has also raised, I think it is quite a significant material consideration. If we are minded to approve this, clearly it would increase the living space and ultimately the occupancy of there as well, which may well exceed the threshold of 7. So whilst it may not be a fundamental planning consideration, it's definitely material.
Members, I think we're heading towards a deferment and finding out exactly what is needed and what is going on. Thank you. We have a proposal to defer and a seconding. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. So it is deferred to come back with an absolute outline of our way forward if this is an HMO and what it requires. Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Chairman, just a point of clarification. If it is an HMO and they are increasing the number of bed spaces within the house, is there any requirement on parking then for the premises, just for knowledge purpose?
I think we need the whole directive when it comes back to before us. So that's got to be part of the whole information we're given. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We can make that. Thank you. Moving on, members. Item 14, EPF 050422 1 Tomswood Road, Chigwell.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, item 14 is 1 Tomswood Road in Chigwell. The proposal is for alterations to the layout of a previously approved planning application which was issued by the Council in September 2021 for the erection of 7 new flatted dwellings. The proposal was before tonight's committee since it's been called in by Councillor Lyon, and officers are recommending that planning permission is granted. So firstly, starting with the application site, the site's located on a prominent junction between Tomswood Road and Man Road within the area of Chigwell. Incidentally, this is the district boundary here, so it's right on the edge of the district. And this is the current status of the site. So clearly, building works are well underway from that previously consented application. And before I go through the proposed changes, I just want members to be very clear about what's being considered through this application. This application is for minor amendments to an already approved and substantially built out development that was granted in 2021. Other than minor changes to the lower ground floor to make that slightly smaller, the building has the same area, same volume, same height, same number of dwellings as the previously approved scheme, same parking offer, everything. There's no change to anything else. So this is not a reappraisal of that entire scheme. So I'll go through now what those changes are. So starting with the lower ground floor, it's a reconfiguration of that floor, removing a lobby and a residence gym. Sorry, this isn't the clearest of images here. And the lower level of a duplex flat. The lower ground floor will now comprise of 1 2-bedroom flat, communal entrance hall, a stair core and a lift. The footprint is reduced. The lower ground floor rear projections, so these projections here, have been removed to square off the building, and a freestanding cycle store is now proposed at the side of the building, which will facilitate active and sustainable transport. Turning to the upper ground floor, the upper ground floor layout has been revised from 1 2-bedroom flat and 1 3-bedroom flat within the same footprint. Previously, this floor comprised of 2 2-bedroom flats and the upper floor of the duplex, which has been removed. In addition, a flat-roofed area to this area here for the 3-bed flat will be now used as a balcony for that unit. The first floor retains the same basic layout, comprising of 2 2-bedroom flats and 1 1-bedroom flat. Minor internal changes are proposed, but the window and door openings remain unchanged. The second floor is amended internally to a 2-bed flat. Previously it was a 3-bed, but the revisions will provide a more spacious layout. And so these are the alterations to the external appearance, so that's what was approved previously. This is that balcony that I was talking about, so this element has been removed, and this is the upper ground floor balcony. And just to give members an idea of what that looks like looking towards the neighbour, so towards number 3 Tomswood Road, due to the significant land level changes across the entire site, it's effectively the ground floor level of the previous dwelling that was there before. So you can see that you can't see number 3 Tomswood Road is the point. In any event, it sits on higher land. There's a retaining wall, a fence, and robust and significant screening. So there won't be a significant risk of overlooking from the provision of the balcony. And just to give you the side elevations, minor alterations to the side elevation, confirmation that the windows in these sides will be of obscure glazing. So in summary, therefore, the alterations are minor in nature. Again, it's not a re-assessment of the entire scheme, and so therefore it is recommended that planning permission is granted, as set out in tonight's agenda, and you'll note that the conditions reflect the stage of works, the stage we're at in terms of the works. So, it has clearly been commenced, etc. And just a final note that all the relevant contributions towards the Epping Forest Special Area for Conservation have already been paid in full. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have two speakers on this application. The objector, Ms. Namos, by Zoom, I believe, is joining the meeting.
Hi there, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. And I'm going to probably stick to the theme of overdevelopments and the number of accidents. Inadequate parking, which unfortunately only escalates, these problems do not go away. Whilst I do recognise that a lot of the amendments are now internal, I feel that there's not been full visibility of this project, and neither have we, as a neighbourhood team, received any communication about the objections that were already shared. I'd like to raise four objections for number 1 Tomswood Road. And whilst I do recognise that the balcony now, which is being proposed on higher ground, is concerning because there is significant changes in the levels in the area, which is noticeable. This will create unnecessary noise and overlooking, not just into number 3 Tomswood Road, but into my garden on the corner of Audley Place, as my garden is at a slope, which we do recognise on the whole of Tomswood Road, which means the level of the balcony and the top of my garden are now at the same level. So I would strongly object to this, as there is not adequate privacy between our properties. In fact, they would now see the entire of my garden space. So hence I would object to this being proposed. Number 2 is the roof windows, which we were promised would be adequately screened. These are not adequately screened. We did lose a lot of greenery during the development of this property. And unfortunately, there is not just between my home, but other neighbours who have been present here today have seen the impact that this window is now having on their private rooms. Not to also mention the third point, the roof line, which is absolutely enormous compared to all other adjacent properties and is not proportionate for this residential area. Again, this was raised a number of times and objections were shared and has not been considered, unfortunately. This has alarmed me quite a lot in terms of it's not in the normal keeping of other family homes in the area. It is significantly taller than its neighbouring properties, and this is even more noteworthy as the proposed development at number 1 Tomswood Road sits on the lower end of the natural slope to number 3 Tomswood Road. The other final point I'd like to also make is it's neighbours on Audley Place, there's very young families that live here. We're encouraging children to be on bikes. And there's always an amendment with number 1 Tomswood Road, but what's not being considered is the parking space. And the danger here is that Audley Place will now be used as an open car parking space area. And what I'd like to bring to your attention in the room, that coaches are being used for some local schools to pick up children. So I wonder how the council will actually maintain safety of those children who are often standing on the corner of Audley Place and Tomswood Road to be picked up by their parents. And already we are seeing blockage by cars, vans who are now actually visiting the property, and this problem will only escalate. And as neighbours, we feel very unsafe, and it's very unfortunate that we picked a place like Chigwell to call home. It no longer is a village, unfortunately, with a number of flats that are being authorised, and even today, it's been very evident with the number of flats that are being coming through. Unfortunately, it's just not a very nice place to live anymore.
Thank you, Reed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a second speaker on this application, Lewis Halliday, the applicant's agent, who is, I believe, in the room. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, members. I'm Lewis Halliday from Phase 2 Planning, the agent on this Section 73 planning application. Officers have provided you with an impartial and objective assessment of the applicant's proposal, having had regard to all relevant material planning considerations. They have concluded the proposal is compliant with the development plan and have therefore recommended that planning permission be granted. It is also encouraging that there have been no objections to the proposal from any statutory consultee except from Chigwell Parish Council. Their concerns have been fully addressed within the committee report prepared by your officers. Nevertheless, we'd like to take this opportunity to request that you take note of the following. As clarified by your case officer, The proposed changes to the originally approved scheme, only the proposed changes to the originally proposed scheme can be considered. As such, comments received in relation to the overdevelopment of the site relate to the principle of development, which has already been established. In any case, the footprint, volume, and height of the apartment block is not to be increased. The scheme will retain 13 parking bays to the same parking court, with the same parking court layout and access onto the road to its north. The proposed amendments to the internal layout of the apartment block are minor in nature. The proposed amendments to the external appearance of the structure are relatively modest, with the officer assessing that the proposed balcony will not introduce any overlooking to the neighbour to the south due to the levels difference and visual screening on the shared boundary, not excluding the balcony itself being screened with etched glass. The applicant agrees with these conclusions. That a cycle store has simply been resited adjacent to the parking court, with the facility remaining secure and convenient for its future residents. It is a view of the applicant, which is shared by your officers, that the concerns raised by Shigwell Parish Council do not constitute grounds for the scheme to be refused, as clearly set out within the committee report. The proposal is also considered acceptable in all other respects. We therefore urge you to support your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chairman. I called this in particularly because of representation by residents, and I think it was just so that the residents have the opportunity to actually speak on the matter. I am not convinced that there are any major issues. However, I'd be interested from the officer's perspective whether you can identify Mrs. Nawaz's property in relation to this particular development.
Of course, bear with me a second. Okay, so this is obviously the upper ground floor with that balcony for the proposal site. Number 3, Tomswood, is this property here. So this balcony is located at this end of the site, and this is number 3 with the rear garden. Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong bit. Sorry, so this is that balcony I was talking about that's being proposed. This is number 3 Tomswood Road, and this is their sort of rear elevation, etc. And just to reiterate, that's what that looks like. That balcony area in, when you're looking towards that neighbouring property.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chairman. So really interesting point raised by the objector at, I believe, number 5 Tomswood Road, as opposed to the neighbouring property at number 3. And I remember this application very clearly. It enjoys a highly prominent location, but it was also highly contentious when it came before committee back in, I think, 2021, thereabouts, long before I was a councillor. But the point that she makes is actually really carefully worded, and it takes somebody who knows the local area very well to be able to appreciate it. The property at number 5 Tomswood Road actually curves around onto Audley Place, and it enjoys a very large garden and, as a result, a lot of amenity space, similar to the property at number 2 Audley Place. So whilst advanced works have begun on this property, I think there needs to be a compromise from the developer. I think, the scheme, as it was consented, was put before committee, and the planning application was granted. But the considerations, whilst they might seem, the amendments, whilst they might seem fairly minor, do have a material effect on the neighbour at number 5 and their enjoyment of their garden amenity space, as well as number 2. So I think the balance is it's a very minor adjustment for the developer, but it has quite a significant impact on the residents at number 5 Tomswood Road, as well as the properties that back on at Audley Place. And I think that's a point that was maybe lost when the planning officer was presenting the application.
Thank you. Councillor Sunga.
Thank you, Chairman. I live about 15 15 Doors Way on Tomswood Road, and I know Audley Place very well. It's one of the most quietest cul-de-sacs in Chigwell, and it's a very nice place to live. Now, in terms of the screening, yes, I think there's an adequate screening with the trees. I think the objector raised a point about noise, and I think that's where I come in here, because Councillor Risby made a very good point on number 2, Audley Place, back onto where the balcony area is. That's where my concern is. They've always enjoyed a quiet enjoyment of living in a quiet residential area, and now I feel with the balcony, introduction of the balcony, will create some noise and will have an impact on the neighbours. I'm not convinced, whilst it might be ticking all the boxes, it's that particular one that's giving me cause for concern. But I'm happy to listen to others at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask the officer to clarify, because those trees which are providing the screening currently are they all on the side of number 3? And if they are any of them protected?
Yes, they are, and no, they're not.
Could I ask, is there a plan, a location plan that actually shows the, that one that shows the Audley Place, was it, and number 5, and then Councillor, you can just see that. Yeah, so 2's alongside. Okay. Yeah, thank you. That solves it. Councillor Wixley, I believe you wanted to...
Yeah, just on this issue of the trees and the fence, that, as I understand it, the trees are in the garden of the objector at number 3. I think I'm correct on that. What about the ownership of the fence? Who is responsible for that?
I don't actually have that information in front of me in terms of who owns that fence. It's the shared boundary between the two neighbours.
I can help answer that if it helps.
I think that's, if it's the responsibility of where the flats are, then I think there ought to be some sort of condition to ensure that the fence is maintained. Obviously, the trees are a responsibility of the neighbour, but that would be my thoughts on this. But I'd just like to ask or suggest another condition should this application be approved. I can't see it, but I would like to see a water efficiency condition if the committee would be agreeable to that, should this be approved.
Is that in the original? That may well be in the original application, I'm not sure. This. Is there any way of... Yeah. While waiting, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just whilst the planning officer is getting up the necessary information, I think the key point with these alterations is the fact that it will have a detrimental impact to the one but neighbour at number 5 rather than the neighbour at number 3, and also the property that backs onto it at number 2 Audley Place. And again, the point that I would stress is, whilst the original scheme is been consented and extensive works have undergone, this very tiny alteration for the developer has quite a significant impact on the two neighbours. That would just be the point that I would reiterate again.
Any news on the consent? Sorry.
I can't see that there is a water efficiency condition on the original consent.
Councillor Wixley.
Well, could we put one on there? I think it's particularly important this time when we know there's hosepipe bans and all the rest of it. Surely that's the forward way of thinking. We had such a condition for the development of flats at 117 High Road in Loughton, so why not this one? I think this is a thing I often raise, there's not consistency in our conditions. So I think this is definitely one that should be applied.
That's not a problem, Councillor. If councillors want that, that's fine.
Members, we've had a debate, we've listened to our speakers, we have a recommendation to grant on this application from the officers. Can we go to the vote? All those in favour of granting on this application, please show.
None.
All those against?
Five.
Abstentions?
11.
Members, that application is refused. Thank you. The reason is the impact on neighbouring properties. Noise detriment to numbers 5 and number 2 Audley Place. Thank you. Councillor Lyon. Vivian. Thank you.
Just to be clear, what is the actual objection? Is it the overlooking to the balcony? Is that the consideration? Or that there is no overlooking on that balcony?
It's the noise.
Noise? Is that...
That's
standing on the balcony having a party.
That's the proposal.
Okay, if that is considered to be a reasonable planning reason.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, members. My understanding is that the motion to grant was defeated, but I don't think members put forward any reasons for refusal that was then voted on. So just a point of process.
Indeed, yeah. Okay. Members, we are now voting on a refusal on the impact to neighbours at number 5 Tomswood Road and 2 Audley Place. All those in favour of refusal on those grounds, please show.
Nine.
Those against?
1.
Abstentions?
7.
So that application is refused on that reason. Thank you. Moving on, members. Item 15 is deferred for a site visit, so we are now on item 16, EPF 056422, 38 Queen's Road, Buckerstill.
Okay, yes. Item 16 is 38 Queen's Road in Buckerstill. The application is for the erection of 2 residential flatted dwellings. Proposal is before tonight's committee due to an objection from Buckerstill Town Council and a neighbour, and officers are recommending that planning permission is granted. The application site is located on the southern side of Queen's Road within the built-up area of Buckerstill. Queen's Road is, it's fair to say, a dense area of development with many shops, cafes, with dwellings located above in many instances. The Waitrose Superstore is located opposite, and in the context of the wider area, Buckerstill Underground Station is within an easy 10-minute walk, and that definitely does provide regular services into London. The application site is the left-hand part of this building, with the mansard roof and the front dormer window. And albeit this isn't the sort of best aerial image, it just illustrates that it's a very narrow plot, a long narrow plot, which has a workshop towards the rear, which is currently unoccupied at the moment. And just to give a slightly better aerial image, this is the application site when viewed from this angle. Again, just to illustrate to members the general pattern of development on Queen's Road, very dense, very built up, not an uncommon site along the whole of Queen's Road, really. So members might remember this is a resubmission of a refusal by Plan South in February of this year, which proposed the delivery of 3 new dwellings on the site, including the one in the workshop, the disused workshop to the rear. That application was refused by this committee for the sole reason of the poor level of accommodation that would be provided by that workshop. This proposal has removed that completely from this application, so effectively that reason for refusal has now been overcome, which, as I say, was the only reason for refusal. The rest of the application remains unchanged. It will extend the existing building towards the rear and provide for 2 new flatted dwellings, both of which are set over 2 floors. So this is one of them and this is the other, so into the mansard roof area. Each dwelling will have its own private amenity space towards the rear and will be accessed via a shared entrance from Queen's Road itself. And finally, these are the proposed elevations. This outline shows the existing form of developments there, and this is the extended part. So again, as I said, it's consistent with the general pattern of development on Queen's Road, which has seen a wide range and scale of these types of extensions to the rear, including the adjoining properties to this application, which incidentally don't have any habitable accommodation on the ground floor. So the scale of this is not going to cause harm to living conditions of neighbours. Just to make clear as well to members, this is proposed as a car-free development, and given the sustainable nature of Buckerstill and the wide variety of shops and services and the good access to London, etc., that is considered appropriate for this part of the district. So finally, it is therefore recommended that planning permission is granted subject to the necessary legal agreements to secure the contributions towards the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation and subject to the conditions set out in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one speaker on the application, Danny Simmons, the applicant's agent, who is joining us by Zoom. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Simmons. Thank you.
Good evening, committee. My name is Danny Simmons. I'm from RPS and I'm the agent acting for the applicant. As explained by your officer, this is an amendment of an application considered by your committee back in February of this year. This current application is the same in terms of alterations and extensions to the Queen's Road frontage building, but significantly, the workshop building, or sometimes known as the annex building to the rear, will remain as existing. This is in accordance with the recommended way forward from your committee at the last meeting, as confirmed by the minute of that meeting. So accordingly, the applicant has acted entirely on your recommendation. This application only results in the net increase of 1 residential unit, whereas the previous scheme provided for a residential unit in the workshop building, which resulted in the gain of 2 units. As with the previous application, with regard to the alterations to the frontage building, the proposed alterations and extensions continue to fully address matters raised by the May 2021 Appeal Inspector. These proposals for additional development in a sustainable district centre location are entirely in accordance with the policies of both your adopted local plan, but also the emerging local plan. Plus, they bring forward a number of benefits which can be summarised as follows. They make the most effective use of previously developed land. They make provision for additional housing, and they will enhance the vitality and viability of Buckhurst Hill District Centre. They will bring forward a car-free development, and also they will provide visual improvements through the repair of the rear elevation of the property. So accordingly, and with respect, I trust that you're able to support these latest proposals. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Members, the officer wants to add something to the presentation.
Apologies, members. One of the things I wanted to add was I recommend it's not in tonight's agenda, but I recommend a condition to secure the photovoltaic panels that are shown on the roof and to therefore, and then be retained throughout the life of the development. Thanks.
We have, do you wish to speak, Councillor? As one of the ward members, in Buckhurst Hill, we've seen so many of these that they're not what I call an ideal home, but that we see it behind most of the shops down Queen's Road at the moment. And as the applicant's agent said, it follows our recommendation from the previous meeting. The officers are recommending granting permission with the addition of a condition for the photo. Sorry, Councillor Murray, before we go to that.
I know it's late. I only briefly wanted to say I think Queen's Road is a lovely road, but it's only a lovely road in parts. A lot of the road is a right mess, and I just think this will add to it, but you can't say no to it because it fits in with the mess that's in large amounts of Queen's Road. I never know a road that's so mixed. Parts of it is absolutely fantastic and lovely, and other parts are just a right mess, and this to me will just add to the mess, but I can't see why we can't object to it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pond.
I think, Chairman, it was me who suggested the way forward last time, so it would be a bit perverse of me to object to it now, and in fact I don't, given what else has happened in Queen's Road. I am just a little bit hesitant about saying anything about Queen's Road after the second item, but on this I have no serious objection.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley.
I'd just like to say, Chairman, how pleased I am to look at condition 8, which refers to a water efficiency condition. So what is good enough for Queen's Road, I'm sure is good enough for Tomswood Hill.
Thank you. Members, we have the officer's recommendation to grant on this application. All those in favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Thank you, members. We go back, if I can get back fast enough on my agenda on this iPad, because my bottom menu's not working. Is there anything under item, got there? Is there anything under item 17?
Nothing, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, members. I declare the meeting closed.